Welcome to the Property Funder podcast. My name is Michael Dean. You can block me or you can mute me on social media at property_funder. I'm here with Laurence today. And before we start talking to Laurence, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to the show sponsor, which is Avonmore Capital. Avonmore Capital is a development and bridging lender based in London, but lending across England and Wales to SME property developers on projects between £250,000 to £15 million. Also, to those of you who are new viewers and new listeners, perhaps you're tuning in because of Laurence, thanks for joining us. If you're a returning viewer or listener, please give us a 5-star review and or give us a follow or subscribe to us. And that means that more people can hear and engage with interesting people like Laurence that we've got here today. Laurence, it's been something I've been wanting to do for a long time, to get you on the podcast. So thank you so much for joining us today. Do you want to just tell us your full name and the name of your business and what your business does?
Great. Really excited to be here today. My name is Laurence Kemball-Cook. I'm the CEO and founder of Pavegen. At Pavegen, we're on a mission to change the way people look at energy. We are trying to unlock the value of a human footstep. And the average person makes 150 million footsteps in their lifespan. And we believe there's a chance to use almost every single one of those steps to make positive change to the planet. Our product is a floor that generates energy from your footsteps. So it converts your weight into electricity and also data when you walk on our floor.
So, Laurence, I've known your product for a long time. I've been following you for a long time, and obviously I'm really impressed with the product that you've got. Talk us through the business model. How does Pavegen make money, and why would a customer want to work with Pavegen? Let's ask, who are your customers, and why would they want to work with Pavegen?
Yeah, so the places we can install Pavegen are effectively anywhere where there's lots of people walking. So think shopping malls, offices, sports stadiums, airports, network rail stations, any rail station in the world. Anywhere there's lots of people walking is a great opportunity. So also like schools, and we also work with brands. So the way we make money is there's three to four revenue streams. The first is we'll sell that hardware with a gross margin, and that'll be a one-off transaction. The second is we will make data revenue off that hardware. So every time people walk on the floor, we collect their data, we reward people for their footsteps. And I guess the way that works is we've created a unique connection for people in cities. You walk on our floor and it's fun. People really, really love the experience of walking on Pavegen. And what we do with this is as you step on it, you can get a reward. It will pop up on your phone or through a screen, and you are rewarded through either a charity donation or a discount on a product. And what we do is we learn about people's behaviors. We're creating an AI model that creates a digital twin of a city that gives granular insights into what's important to people. And we can talk about that later, but effectively there's a software as a service model that sits alongside the hardware, and so that's recurring revenue, and you know how much people love a bit of ARR, so that takes us into that domain. And then the other ways are we have extended warranties on our product, and then the final way is kind of by accident is we rented a Pavegen floor once and someone used it as a dance floor. We were like, sure, you can do that. And that's grown into fairly significant like rental business, if you like, that will rent Pavegen tiles out for events all around the world, from the Australian Open tennis competition, making interactive floors, to shortly we're going to be installed in the heart of Trafalgar Square in partnership with UEFA for the Champions League final in the fan zone, and Rockstar Energy. And we've really done events all around the world at some of the biggest sporting competitions. And so, yeah, full way. So hardware, recurring, SaaS revenue, maintenance, and also product rentals as well. And effectively for us, we're on a crusade here. This is we're not just like another double glazing company or another SaaS company offering something else. We're on a complete new product category. And I guess if you ask my former self, would I start this again? Look, I love the journey, I love Pavegen, but wow, it takes a while. And I've been doing this for some time, and really the brand work and the rental projects allow us to gain massive exposure around the world. That is all about, we're pounding those pavements to make sure that people will understand the potential of kinetic energy, because no one else is doing it. So it works really well hand in hand with what we're building.
I've got so many questions, and so I really want to dive in to the business side of it and and the rollout of the product. But before we go down that road, could we just get, I suppose, the origin story? How did we get here? How, what inspired you to found Pavegen, and before that, how did you develop the skills and the technical know-how to get to even the beginning of Pavegen? So start whenever you want, but kind of from school or from university. Let's talk about your story, the story arc, and how we got here.
Yeah, so I think it started off. I guess I grew around a father who was into property. He actually did some property development. I remember seeing the story and actually my first ever job was labouring on his building site, but understanding how that can work and leading to passive income. And then I guess before that, my great grandfather was responsible for converting the naval fleet from coal to oil, and that was a huge deal and like a big industrial innovation, if you like. So I guess I come from a background of industrialists in my bloodline, and I've always been interested in how things work, and I guess I've always been a bit interested in how to make money. Nothing felt as good as my paper round age 12, getting £12 a week cash. Felt like I was a millionaire. And I guess as an engineer, I got really into design. I studied industrial design and technology at Loughborough University. So think of product design. Industrial designers will build and design phones to buildings. And when I was there, I got the chance to collaborate with E.ON. So E.ON were doing these huge PFI bids at the time, and we were designing some live projects. And they said, Laurence, hey, we kind of like your work, and it's like I guess I was a bit of a geek around it at uni, and they said, look, do you want to come work for us and do an internship? So I jumped at the idea, bought my first suit from Marks and Spencer's, rolled up as an intern and went to the Colville power plant in, I think it's Derbyshire, where E.ON were headquartered. And they said, Laurence, we want you to design streetlights that are using the energy from the sun and also the wind. And so I started this program where there's me and a couple of friends where we were fully funded by E.ON, going around the country, doing partnerships with LED companies, solar research institutes, and it was all really exciting. And we were like the little babies at a conference that everyone had heard about, were funded by E.ON. Anyway, it didn't work, right? I had this great year, but it didn't work, and I failed. I failed because using solar energy in dense urban environments isn't possible. You don't get good sunlight in urban environments. Think about the amount of shading between all of those skyrise buildings. And then also wind, again, similar reason, you don't get good wind. So I failed at E.ON and I left. And I guess hanging my head in shame, it was my first ever job. I came back to uni, came back to my family, everyone was upset. They're like, you failed. And I guess I kind of got a bit obsessed with this problem. I don't like failure. I don't like taking no for an answer. And I kept thinking, hold on, like, I can't have failed. That was like a good challenge. So I just thought, okay, well, what about building a street light that is powered by something else? So my first idea, I actually went to a bus stop because it was a bit smaller to build. And I thought, can I make a bus stop that you do a ninja kick, and you kick it and you generate energy, right? I grew up in Brixton, so the youths of Brixton are known for their energy, right? So I just thought, let's use their energy. And then I thought, well, hold on, doing a ninja kick in front of a number 47 bus probably isn't a great idea. Then I thought, okay, what about a pad at the bottom that you could jump on, a bit like at a fairground where you pull up the mallet and you pull it in the air and you slam it down as hard as you can, and then it goes ding, ding, ding. And I thought, well, why don't we do that with the bus stop? And I thought, well, hold on, what about like the old men and the old ladies? I want everyone to do it. And I think part of being an industrial designer is about being as inclusive as possible. So I thought, well, let's not make people kick it. Let's not make people jump on it. Let's make people walk on it. It's just easy. So I thought, there's this abundant energy source in our cities that's all around us. And I kind of had this idea, and I honestly don't think I slept for 3 days. At the end of the 3 days, I went to the workshop for 16 hours, and I built my first, like, very, very crude, basic prototype. And if it was here in front of us, it would be a rectangular shape that would be made out of MDF, held together by duct tape and chewing gum, and sounded, everything creaked when you stood on it. But effectively, if you jumped on it, some sort of light would come on, okay? And I was friends with my head of department, so he let me like stay there late after everyone went, and I just like keep building and building it. And I remember I showed it to my tutor at uni, and they said like, Laurence, I don't believe you. That doesn't work. They're like, you definitely put a battery in there, because that light, when you stand on it, okay, so you stand on it, that light comes on for like almost 5 seconds. And I showed him and he's like, oh, you've actually made that work. And it was so crude. I can't put into words how basic this thing was. But then I kept thinking about it and developing it, and it came to my design show and I presented Pavegen. I got through to this show in London and I had this floor tile. Again, it was horrendously basic, but at the design show, it got into the South London Press, and the South London Press put me on the front page, and it was like lighting up London from your steps. And I thought nothing of it. It was a little local paper. And then I think I went away on holiday with my friends after uni celebrating. And then it went into the Mail, the Telegraph. It went viral in the early days of Twitter, and the headlines were everywhere. And I did create a website because I guess I like designing stuff. So I just thought, for fun, I'll build a website. I had my mobile number on the bottom of it, so a very crude website. And basically the phone wouldn't stop ringing. Like, I was getting 1,000 phone calls a day. I had people from Japan, America, Nigeria, all over the world saying, hey, can we buy the product? And can we distribute the product? And can we invest? And I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea. Like, what is a company? So I came back early from this trip and I sat in the front room with my dad, and I was like, I think I was going to go and design bus shelters in New York for an architecture firm. That was my first job I had lined up. And we were talking, we were like, hey, this is a cool opportunity. So I immediately phoned up the company I was going to get my first proper job with, the architecture firm. I said, sorry, I quit. And they were a bit upset. And then I said, look, let's start a company. So I guess I didn't know anything. I haven't done an MBA. I haven't done 50 exits before. And I just started, and like, being honest, I have made every mistake known to man in the early days. It took me a long time, but what better way to learn than doing it on the job through actual practical tests? So the first thing I did was we went to every single venture capitalist in London, and they said, no, forget about it. It will never work. And I didn't. My dad did my financial model. My business plan was like super basic. And then the next thing after that was I went to the government. I said, guys, you have this technology support service. Can you help me? And they finally phoned me back after 2 weeks. And the phone rang, and I was really excited. And they said, Laurence, all our engineers have thought about it. It will never work. And I was like, what? They go, yeah, don't bother. It will never work. So I was like, oh, okay, fine. And then I've been on my university at Loughborough University, and I said, guys, can you help me? And they came back and they're like, yeah, by the way, Laurence, we own 51% of your company because you developed it at university. And I was like, hold on. No, you don't. And there was a bit of a fight, and they said, okay, fine, we don't own 51% of your company, and no, we can't help you. So I'm there, government said no, investors said no, university tried to steal it, and then eventually just said, fine, you do what you want with it. It's probably worth about £5 anyway. And then I kept developing it with friends, and I would have friends who worked in factories, and I say, look, hey, can you do me a favor? Can you run this through at night? I need a new drive shaft, machined from stainless steel. I need ball bearings pressed into it. Can you manufacture this? And they slowly, after a period of months, would help me upgrade my basic components to slightly better ones. And I won some awards. I was living off award money at the time. So I won, I think at the early stages, I won the Royal Society of Arts Design Directions competition. And that was 5K. And wow, when I was 22, 5K felt like £5 million. And so I started going to factories and really speaking seriously to people about manufacturing it, although my 5K didn't last long. Eventually, I really perfected the design to a point where it looked okay, and I still was getting all these rejections. And I was walking past a building site in the South Bank, so right near the London Eye, near Waterloo. And I saw this site, and I said to my friend, I said, wouldn't it be great to put a Pavegen there? And we sneaked back at around 1 a.m. We had a Pavegen with us. We had some sand, some cement, mixing bucket, water, pickaxes, grout, all this stuff to put it in. And we removed a tile that was there, sneaking around, and we lay Pavegen in. And if you were there, what you'd see is you'd see a rectangular tile on the floor, flush with the pavers, and then you see lots of LED lights located around the sides. So when you walked, all these lights came on. It looked really cool. So at 4:30 in the morning, we finished mixing our concrete. We've troweled it in very, very roughly. If any of your people listening know a lot about sand and cement and doing good concrete work, I was definitely a strong 1 out of 10. So it was really basic. And anyway, we sneaked away at 5 a.m. I got a couple of photos, and cheekily, I put my website, the future of energy is here. And I still have my mobile number on the bottom, and I had the photo. And I got this call the next day. So, woke up late, and the calls from Westfield, and they said, "Is this Laurence?" And I said, "Yes." They said, "We've been tracking your company. Is it correct you did an installation yesterday?" And I said, "Yes." They said, "Did it work?" I said, "Yes." And they didn't ask me, did you have permission? And did you have building compliance? Did you have insurance? I had nothing. But I didn't lie. They just said, "Did it work?" I said, "Yes." And did you do it? "Yes." And they said, "Can you buy one?" And I was like, "Oh, wow. Yeah, you can buy one." And I'm looking around the room panicking, I had like one friend helping me at the time. And they said, "How much?" And I'm like, I don't know how much. And I said, £350,000, please. And like, they paid. And I was like, okay, so I'm in my bedroom in Brixton, living off this tiny bit of prize money. And suddenly we had this 350K for a real project for Westfield. And that's when the journey started, because there's a huge difference between a student innovation and a seriously engineered product, fully compliant. There was a whole list of standards. They didn't even have standards that existed for energy floors that generated energy and moved when you walked on them. There was no standards. So we were going to these test houses, we were trying to set them on fire, we were looking at the EMC, electrical radiation from the product and all this stuff. Anyway, we went ahead, delivered it with Westfield, and I guess that's when the journey started properly. We raised our first round of funding, was around 100K, where I had a rig in my garage at the time that was simulating 1 million footsteps. And I knew if I could simulate 1 million footsteps, this product would be durable. Westfield didn't know it was quite as sketchy as it was at that point. So I did the testing. It was basically like a golf buggy motor, a lump of wood, and it was going bang, bang. And I remember getting complaints from the neighbours because there's this pounding going on non-stop in this garage. But I got the 1 million steps. I proved the core technology worked. We raised 100K from like friends and family. Then we did 350K from the London Business Angels. And then we kind of got some more momentum. I think we then raised another 850 from the Harvard Business Angels. And today, where we are, we've raised around £10 million.
So you've raised 10 million total. I mean, that's an incredible amount of money. We just talk about team. So obviously you started off at the beginning, it was just you. What's the evolution of the team look like? Because I guess the 10 million, a lot of that will have gone into R&D, will have gone into I suppose hardware, but I guess a lot of it will also have gone into people, because people obviously are very generally quite expensive, but they're also an important part of the journey. How's your team evolved since you founded it? And can we just clarify, what year did you sort of get this started, when you were just out of uni and you'd had your failure after your year with Eon? What year was that, and how long ago was that?
So it was 2009 when I graduated and had this like first prototype, and probably spent 6 or 7 years on the kind of back burner researching this until it went fully like commercial, if you like.
Yeah. What were you doing in the meantime? Were you working on this full time, or you were saying that it was on the back burner? So what were you doing in the meantime? Were you doing other stuff, other gigs, other jobs?
Yeah. So basically,
what did that look like?
Well, so yeah, during that time, I was basically applying to every competition I possibly could and doing like various freelance projects and picking them up. But I do remember getting like an award, and they gave me like a check. And I would like be sprinting to the bank because I had like so many commitments. I was like, I really need this money right now. So yeah, it was hard. I don't think I earned more than like 10,000 a year for like the first 10 years or something. And even then it probably went to like 12K. So like it was really bootstrapping it for a long time. And I believe founders should be kept lean as possible for as long as possible. So it was really kind of bootstrapped vibes at that point.
Yeah, well, I have to say that with Avamore, the business that as Zahir and I co-founded, we basically took nothing out of the business for the first 5-6 years. The classic sort of 10K, the classic 10K salary, but nothing really apart from that. And yeah, it does give you that kind of real hungry, driven vibe. I think bootstrapping is a great way to go. But notwithstanding that, look, you raised, like I said, we raised a lot of money. So so from the point where you kind of got started, 2015, when you got that sort of light bulb moment, excuse the pun, with when Westfield offered you 350K to put your product in there, how did you then evolve the business in terms of the people and the team?
Yeah, so I guess I'm a technical founder, engineering background. So immediately what I did is I think I hired 5 electrical engineers, because there was so many issues around, maybe we could generate that energy, but actually collecting that energy, storing it, controlling it, building data was a huge hurdle. So I brought in all these amazing engineers, and we were like an engineering-led company, like totally. Probably 98% of the personnel, 95% were all engineers in the early days, because it was all like, let's build it. We've got to do it. We've got to build it. We've got to make it work. And then I think we started bringing in interns in sales, and I had this one intern who closed 1 million of deals after joining as an intern. He's gone on to be like VP at Crowdcube, and he's done super well, and we're really close to this day. But it was amazing how like young people with bright ideas really got involved, because I surrounded myself with people exactly like me, because that's all I knew. No one told me how to hire, and we didn't really have that much money, and what we did was all going into manufacturing. But then it evolved. Then we, people were onboarded, did fantastic with us, and then went on to get amazing, very, very highly paid jobs that we couldn't compete with, because it was slow. Hardware is slow. We can talk about Instagram getting acquired in 2 years for $1 billion, and many, many stories you'll see online. But ultimately, hardware is hard and does take time. And then we really started to bolster our at executive level. So we've got a really strong COO who's been there since early days. We've got a really strong commercial director now, and we've got a world-leading chief technology officer. And then you have to have like a good CFO. My dad was my CFO. He was a chartered accountant at BT. He didn't last long, put it that way. It was great for my first model when I didn't really know how to use Excel. But now we have a CFO who's had a significant amount of experience selling businesses. So I think now for us, team is everything, culture is everything, and having a young, hungry team that have to cross-fertilize ideas between sales, production, engineering, technology, software development. There's so many elements to it, and it's really all about that culture and alignment, so that everyone feels they're all part of taking Pavegen to the moon. And I've always believed in that. If I ask a junior sales analyst what they do, they're not just doing some boring research. They're like, hey, I'm going to make Pavegen $1 billion company, or I'm going to take Pavegen to every city, every town, every village, every community in the world. So they're really aligned to that core mission of what we're doing. But hey, look, it was super scrappy in the early days, and I kind of miss just being in a room of engineers non-stop. But things have evolved now significantly.
And so in total now, how many people are you?
So we're about 35 at the moment.
Wow, yeah,
and we're based in. We're sitting in our Covent Garden head office now. We actually have a manufacturing facility in North London, and then we also have like a tech campus in Cambridge, where a lot of our kind of developers and electronic engineers are based.
Oh wow! Okay, so there's multi-site, lots of people. I mean, yeah, that's really quite something. And revenue-wise, what sort of revenues are you now generating? Because I guess to be able to sustain that sort of headcount, you've got to have a good amount of revenue to sustain that sort of headcount.
Yeah, I mean, this year we're hoping for around 5 million revenue. It's a challenging time. I think when you work on these mega projects, for us, we might have the most exciting building project in the world, but it's going live in 3 years' time. As your clients know, when you bridge something, you're not going to get revenue for a while. So I think for us, it can be lumpy, but with that, there's huge potential of having a whale deal, which might be 10 million revenue from a huge new project. So yeah, we're looking for around 5 million revenue this year.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's still amazing achievement. That puts you probably in the top 1% of all businesses. Not just nationally, but also internationally. So, hats off to you, because I think that's it's a great starting point, I guess, in your perspective, because you obviously have very big plans for the business. I mean, I look at this business. I look at the product. I think it's amazing. I imagine most people would agree that it's amazing. What's been your biggest challenge in terms of adoption and selling the product?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. So one, we're on a crusade, right? So no one has a line item in their development plan for kinetic energy flooring. You might have a flooring budget or a slab build-up budget in your skyscraper, but there's no budget ring fence for this. So we are fighting our way through to get budget allocated to this. That's one. I think the problem we solve has evolved. So maybe to set it in context is I started as an ex-energy engineer at E.ON trying to solve an energy challenge. What was really interesting is we did our first installations. I broke into the South Bank, as I talked about, but I took it to my old school. I just broke in there again because I was like, I need to test this quickly. But people really loved walking on the product, and like the kids were going crazy on it. And the Times wrote an article and saying like, this is a school where teachers shout at you and telling you to run, not walk in the corridor because they'll get more energy. And then we took it to some festivals. We did like Festival with Rob the Bank, and like people were so drawn to it. Like babies were crying when their mothers took them away from this amazing light up energy floor we created. So it was amazing seeing this effect we created. So in that journey, and that then ended up with us going into Heathrow Airport. And I remember whenever I flew out of Heathrow, I'd be like a weird stalker in the corner, and I'd just be watching people on my product. I'd usually have like a clipboard out, or like probably illegally filming people on it, because I was just like really interested to see how the public interact. And nothing brings me more joy than seeing people on my product today. But I saw like an old man, an old lady with walking sticks, like start jumping on it, and I was like, this is cool. Like he was going, come on, he probably said, come on Deirdre, come and have a jump, and the lights would come on. And I just thought like, we've connected people to energy, and making energy fun maybe is more important than trying to compete with Chinese solar or whatever, whatever else is going on in the world. So with that in mind, that allowed us to like shift our proposition, because the way we look at it, if you see huge developments, let's say Olympia, there's a huge development happening there. They will build the properties to be like as green as they can, and they'll go for LEED certification and have a big stamp outside saying we're LEED. But when you ask people in the building who work there, like no one ever knows what LEED is. Only the architects who built it and the top tier of the company might know about it. And I'll also speak to banks where they're saying, hey, we've got recycled plastic desks, we've got LED lights, we've spent $1 million on solar on the roof, but like no one knows about it. And what we've realized Pavegen does is a way to bring people into the conversation, to bring the most important asset of a business, its people, into the conversation. So you walking, you're engaging in the sustainability journey. So right now we are like an off-grid energy source that we offer to clients, but we're also a way to bring ESG to life and bring sustainability to life. And I think I share this with, we work closely with Thomas Heatherwick, the architect, and he's all about fun cities. Cities should be fun, places of curiosity, gamification, and we really bring these sites to life.
So you talk about going back into energy. So is that in the context that because you've evolved the business model away from the hardware, shall we say, to, I suppose, the other revenue streams that we discussed? If we were to try and put it into context, you know, if we can sort of in layman's terms, how much energy does a footstep, the average person's footstep, generate, and what sort of impact can that actually have in terms of the energy needs of a building?
Yeah, so the biggest question we get is, hey, can I have Pavegen because I want to power my city? I want to power the world with Pavegen, or can I put it in my garden and my dogs generate energy to power my house? Now, all those are amazing ideas, but the energy from humans is limited. So for example, if both of us were Olympic athletes, obviously we're very strong and fit, but if we were Olympic athletes and we got on a bike and we were generating energy and we went flat out for half an hour, we would only just power a toaster together, and that would probably equate to under 20p's worth of energy, right? So humans are limited in their energy, and obviously if you compare that to passively walking on Pavegen in a way that doesn't take much energy to do, we need millions of steps to create serious amounts of power. So the energy from an installation, we can bring energy to life, and you can see, for example, if you put 30 square meters in Oxford Street in London, it would produce enough energy to power around 80 lights in the station for around 7 hours. So at night time, all the lights would come on around the station from 30 square meters. Obviously scale that up, there's more energy. But I wouldn't look at it as something where you can get a payback period of under 2 years. That's not what we're trying to do. We see solar as a great opportunity for that. We're an off-grid energy device that works in areas where other renewables don't. And we don't offer, at this moment in time, a really short payback period. That we're trying to focus on that high-end market, bringing sustainability to life, and that ESG element.
Yeah. So we're probably talking about, I suppose, major infrastructure projects which are, you know, which have very high footfall. So like train stations, like retail centres or retail destinations, you know, mass transit, all that kind of thing. What's the most famous place at the moment that you're active, that you're installed?
I think my favourite is probably outside the White House, where we partnered with the District Department of Transportation in Washington, and we have an installation there, well, 3 of them actually, and the energy from around 10,000 people a day, we accumulate that energy in batteries, and then we use it to power the lighting in this kind of pocket park area. So that's all, illuminated from people power.
That's
and
really
that was
cool.
our first installation of the new V3 version we released. And then my other favorites are, if you go to Hong Kong, okay, you can't really run on the streets. It's quite polluted and really dense. So what we built on the 4th story of an office block in East Kowloon, this 4th story is empty, right? It's a garden and a running track. And we built Pavegen into a 200-meter running track. So as people run around the building, their steps power the lights around the running track, and they also trigger rewards from their movement. And it's really cool because the anchor tenants are WeWork and JP Morgan. And I recently heard that JP Morgan renewed their lease because their staff love the running track so much.
Wow.
There's a real pull for them to use it. So I say, Hong Kong's cool. We've got some really exciting infrastructure projects coming up that I just feel like my whole working career has been based around doing this, making impact. And we've got some really significant projects in the hundreds, if not thousands of meters coming up.
Can you say any more about those?
I think what I can say at the moment is, as much as we love the UK and we sit here in central London and obviously it's brilliant, we're not building on the same level as some of the other countries. And I think we look towards places like the Middle East, where there's more development there than sometimes you could say the rest of the earth combined, with new cities being built, with huge new developments. Most of the world's cranes are in that region, and where we see cranes, we see opportunity for Pavegen. So there are projects there that we're currently working on that will see Pavegen at scale, and then similarly there's some in America that will take Pavegen to another level in a kind of mass transit scenario soon.
Yeah, okay, well I guess we need to watch this space. You're looking to raise some more money, or you're looking to do some fundraising at the moment, as I understand. Before we ask that, what would you say has been the biggest inhibitor to your growth? Like, when I hear, when we talk about the product, it's obviously very exciting. It sounds like the users, the consumer, if you're not talking about the actual landowner or freeholders that you're working with, but the consumer seems to love the product as well as I suppose, as well as the freeholders. Strikes me that, Pavegen should be a household name, and, pretty much everyone, you could almost make an argument that almost anyone in a large city should be experiencing Pavegen on a regular basis. What's been the main inhibitor behind that? What would you say has been holding Pavegen back? As I suppose you're patient, but you're patiently impatient.
Yeah, I think the first thing is, I believe any B2B company should be B2B2C. People need to love you, and you need to have great content on socials, and that is verification for a B2B client. Okay, so I think getting on board with the right B2B clients is challenging. I think you put it this way, right? Let's just say that me and you are the best salesmen in the world, and we hit the phones for a month right now to all the biggest developers in the world. Now, we might get through to 60% of them, and they might love us, but they might not be building a project tomorrow. They might be like, oh, great you phone, guys. We're actually laying the floor tomorrow. Can we buy it? They might say, hey, I need you in 2028. I need you in 2030. So I think that the timelines of development means it does take a while to get installed permanently. And I think the other element is, it's a really, really hard product to engineer. It's only been in the last few years where we've actually realized that we've made a truly stable product that can be installed anywhere in the world. There's always changes happening to it, but I think if you look at millions of footsteps, the impact that can have on a technology, if you look at the vandalism element, the point loading, did you know that a woman in high heels, if she goes into H&M, or a man in high heels, whoever it is, if they stomp their foot on the ground in frustration, they can crack the concrete screeds? And that's what H&M told me. So this happens, right? So I'm engineering a technology to go into a really tough environment. We've got vehicles that might drive on it. We've got cranes that might be erected on it. We've got fires that might happen on it. So there's so many things that it has been a huge engineering challenge to overcome these hurdles to create a stable technology. And then it also comes down to cost. So I want to build the biggest robotic factory in the world that will allow me to assemble Pavegen. Now, right now, we hand build the products in North London. And for those of you familiar with our capital city, it's not renowned for high volume manufacturing like you might see in China. So we need to scale up production, and that in turn will allow us to reduce the product cost. And I think we're really focusing on getting the product right, growing into new markets with strong proof of concepts, because you need to do that first before you can start to like roll out and sell 20 million pounds of Pavegen to one client to cover their city. So it's kind of literally like step by step in that way, and it's never been more exciting than today.
So the next round of fundraising at the moment, is that mainly on the technical side, basically for manufacturing, to enhance your manufacturing capability, or specifically what are you looking, how much are you looking to raise first of all, and what would you say the split is around the deployment between, I guess, sales and marketing, and then where often a lot of the money gets spent, and I suppose manufacturing and R&D?
Yeah, so I think what I can say about the raise is it'll be a decent sized Series B raise. We'll follow up separately under NDA. Is I think a portion of yes is going for manufacturing and scale up. What's so interesting about Pavegen is we spend less than 2% of our revenue on marketing, right? Typical startups are anywhere from like 30 to 50%, right? So we spend virtually nothing on marketing today. And we're lucky to have operations in 37 countries and over 1 billion steps on our product. That's amazing. But like, we really haven't started yet. So my main aim now is to take Pavegen to new markets, communicate to new groups around the benefits of the technology, and really scale in those different verticals. So it's a combination of growth capital for marketing, but also engineering and scale up to deploy in those markets.
Okay, that's really cool. You talked about you talked about the impact of someone, they use the H&M example, someone standing and stamping on the screed, and actually you even mentioned, you've got to be able to handle vehicles going on it. Have you looked at a solution, say, using, I'm just thinking about Regent Street, for example, where you've got buses going over a small stretch of road? Have you experimented with roads and generating a bit of energy that way? Because I guess a bus or a car is going to generate a lot more energy than you and I could running on it, as you quite intelligently pointed out.
Sure, it's a great question. I guess the way to look at it is we are the world leaders in kinetic energy, right? We know a lot about taking a little bit of movement, so it moves around 5 millimeters from a human, turning to electrical power. If you scale that up, the opportunity is huge. The average human in the UK is around, or average male is I think 79 kilos in the UK, woman is 69. What's the average car in the UK? I think that it's definitely going to be over 1,000 kilos, easily 3,000 kilograms and more. So there's a huge opportunity, because the energy generated is movement multiplied by weight, load, is power, right? So if you just say 79 kilos multiplied by 5 millimeters of movement is 3 to 5 watts or 3 to 5 joules, depending on how heavy you are. With a car, it's infinitely more. I've been dreaming about the Association of British Ports, which may not be on everyone's dream list, but if you go to Dover and you were to put in around 5 of our, let's just call them road speed bumps that generated energy, you could be generating around 80k a year in power from that. It's hard, right? So the reason I haven't done it is because we need serious infrastructure. We need huge test equipment. I need you driving around an HGV, hammering it all day long. So that's coming up next. That's part of what we're going to do in the future. And I think we're really into this idea of like, there's so many other places to take it. We've had ideas for anywhere you can imagine to generate energy from. And the basic ones are everything from a cow milking facility with thousands of cows going through, to horse training, equestrian facilities. But hey, look, we all wear shoes, right? And there's an opportunity to integrate it within that, and especially as we see consumer electronics being more prevalent and everything we're doing, there's massive opportunities there. So we want to make the most of this opportunity of the brand we've created in these markets.
You say, so is 2-3 years time we're looking at a power bank in our shoes. So when your phone's running low on battery, you've got a power bank in your feet where all those steps, all the energy from those steps is being stored. It's probably a way away, but it's almost a direction you could go in, I guess.
100%. And I always think, like, when my phone runs out of battery and I get frustrated, I'm always walking around a city or an airport, and it's always when you're active. So what better way to harness the energy from being active and traveling and then using it in somewhere you really need it. And God knows what we're going to be doing in 5 years with consumer electronics on our bodies, but we can hook it up to any of those items. So it's definitely something we think about a lot.
Yeah, and you talked about making a lot of mistakes. You made every mistake. What would you say your biggest learning was from the mistakes that you made in the journey so far?
I think the first one is, it's really easy to get excited about an investor and to be, I've got an investor. A lot of the investors in the early days didn't necessarily have the right intentions. We definitely had challenges in the early days with even investors coming on board and then making unfair demands or blocking transactions that were vital for the company's success, or saying, hey, I'll invest 100K, but can you employ my son for like 150K? Now, right now, if someone walked in, I'd just be like, no. But back then, I didn't know any better. We didn't take that investment, but we definitely talked about it. There were very similar things that would happen along the way. So I think we kissed a lot of frogs in the early days and allowed us to understand what is a good deal and what is a bad deal, and that was really important. I think cash flow is a really important one. Like, cash is king. If you work with me or know me, I treat every pound like it's our last. Although we're a company with revenue and all this good stuff, cash is king, and we don't want to throw money away for no reason. So I remember in the early days, I would be in a favela in Rio. I've just launched a 500K soccer pitch installation funded by Shell. I've got Pele there, and we've launched it to 97 camera crews, and it was an incredible moment. All the media, Pele started crying in a press conference, and Time magazine were writing a big piece about it. And then just after that, 5 minutes, I walked down the road, did a phone call with my team, and we were literally having phone calls about wrapping Pavegen up because we were technically insolvent. The company was pretty much run off my credit card at that point, but there was, it was suddenly going from that massive high to like, oh, we actually haven't got any money in the bank. And I think in the early days, that happens every minute because you're constantly balancing, I need to spend 100K on intellectual property filings. I need to spend 200K on a production run to be able to satisfy my next batch of orders, but the client hasn't paid yet, but I've got to commit it, but I've only got 200K in the bank, what do I do? And it's a constant chicken and egg with cash flow. So I've definitely, in the early days, was very, very close to the line. And I think I spent every penny I had on IP, and we needed to get those filings. And today we've got around 4 patents filed internationally, and it's ongoing with various prosecutions. But I think I spent my last pound on IP, and we almost nosedived the ship, nosedive, and then just at the last minute we closed the deal and it was fine again. So I think the cash flow in the early days was one hell of a roller coaster. Every day was a Hail Mary, let's see what happens. And I think we've really learned the power of having good cash flow, having good forecasts, working to budgets, and I guess it's not as fun these days, but it's definitely a better way to run a business.
Yeah. I think I think it's an experience that most successful entrepreneurs will have, is that, and I've experienced it as well, where I can remember 2017 we had a situation where I was sat with Zahara and I was like, we're down to our last sort of 30K here. If we can probably only go for another couple of months, and we have to start dipping our hands into our pockets, or we're going to have to wrap things up. And so I think most entrepreneurs will have experienced that, where you kind of get right to the bare bones, and then something happens, a deal comes in, and then you're away again. But much like you did, we operated on very, very tight, operated a very tight ship for a very long time, and continue to do so, because ultimately, where I look at people in our sector, but also in all sectors, the businesses that I guess you hear the classic stories about these startups where the founders raise some money, and then they start buying silly things and start focusing on where they need to deploy that capital. That moment, the example, the story that you gave about being with Pele in the favela, and that the Shell sponsored scheme, that should have been a real moment of celebration and joy, but obviously it was a moment of real soul searching and really difficult. Would you say that was the most challenging time that you experienced, or was there any other times when you're like, oh my God, that was, I'm so glad that we survived that?
I feel like that was like one of many, I can look back on this now, because being honest, I love the startup journey. I love being in the trenches, taking bullets every single day. And whereas a CEO of an international conglomerate is up in that jet plane, strategically flying, and they're great, but they can be absolutely useless in that early stage, getting to revenue quickly, getting investment, scaling, blitz scaling, whatever you want to call it. I remember stuff like we were going to do a show, the Stadium Summit, in the Allianz Stadium in Nice, and we basically ran out of money on the way there at that exact moment. So I remember I was sleeping on a pallet in the back of a van on the way there, had my suit hanging up, and I was like, we can't afford a hotel, let's go lean. And then I suddenly get my suit on, and then I jump on stage at this event and suddenly get loads of stadiums interested in drummed up revenue. But it was in the early days literally really, really tough on that. And I remember I had offers for investment, but they would be like, hey, we're a VC, we want 30%, we'll give you all you need. And I felt that I want to, a lot of my friends will say, hey, I've got a VC investment, I'm great, this is my A grade, this is what I wanted. And it's a real aspirational thing for them. Whereas we went down other means that took longer and lots of small rounds, but now I still have 50% of the company. And I think that makes us different maybe to other companies where some of my founder friends have only got 5% or 10% of that. So we took capital that we felt would be the right value for us, and also not people sitting on boards saying, you've got to sell in 2 years because my fund needs to close. And we would take it in the right way to create value for all shareholders. But that means that, it definitely was tight in the early days and in those journeys. And, I look back on them with fond memories now. And I haven't slept in the back of a van, I can say, for a couple of years.
Not willingly, anyway. I guess you talk about having 50% of the company. Do you think actually now that makes Pavegen a more interesting, a more attractive proposition to an incoming investor, because you as the founder have got so much more skin in the game than other potential VC investments, target investments that a VC or an investor might be looking at, because you've got more riding on the success of the business than any single VC might have, which is possibly not the case when someone like you said is diluted down to 5 or 10% of the remaining business. Yeah,
it's a really good question, and I think it might be pretty good to ask a VC that. I've heard stories where a founder has 5% and the VC comes in, and then they actually give some shares to the founder, so they've got more skin in the game. And it might be where there was 4 founders at the beginning, and then someone goes, and then that's why this poor one guy or girl is left with 5%. So maybe that's a plus side. I think it gives us flexibility. It means that we're not absolutely fixed on having some sort of sell side M&A event where we're just desperate to sell Pavegen because that investor needs an exit on their fund, they're closing, and all those kind of things on a corporate level. But look, there's opportunity, that's for sure, with the next round of funding for someone to get a sizable amount of the company to help us steer us. But the main thing we want is strategic partners. My dream is one of the biggest developers in the world says, hey, we really like Pavegen as part of our fund. We'll buy a chunk of Pavegen or buy the company, but we actually want to roll you out in 15 countries on scale. And then that's how it works. So they're the conversations we're having at the moment, from Japanese conglomerates to Middle East developers, for American developer, all those kinds of people are where there's that massive synergy, because not only are you going to have an equity in the company, but the valuation will jump based on the deployments that you're doing, and you get that reward. So it's a win-win there.
Yeah, I mean, when just thinking about it, and obviously having a strong interest in these kind of things, I'm always curious about M&A and strategic partnerships, and look at, say, obviously Westfield being one of your first customers. In that regard, that would seem like, if I was to look at a strategic partnership between a Westfield or fill in the blank shopping centre owner developer, that would feel like quite a natural kind of, you would look like a very interesting and attractive M&A target in that context. I suppose in the other, and obviously you can respond to that if you want, but the other side of it is, do you think that you're a very long-term thinker? I mean, that's pretty apparent to me. Do you think that your approach to long-term thinking and being kind of long-term greedy actually ironically makes you not attractive to all VC, to every VC? You talk about that, the VC who wants you in and out in 2 years, 5 years, because they want to hit their IRR multiple. is it because you're looking with such a long-term view that certain VCs, I mean, I know a lot of VCs obviously are able to invest for the longer term, but do you think that also makes you less attractive because you're never going to compromise your principles, to hit some arbitrary short-term financial target?
I think that VCs over-index on software. They love fintech. They're all piling into AI. They all piled into blockchain. They all kind of, I guess, like we're looking at as a herd mentality. I've seen the London VC WhatsApp group. They all one tiny little community and they all speak. So no offense to VCs, but obviously like they do have their own thesis that is around those high, like fast scaling software businesses that all they want is that ARR piece. So typically like hardware isn't as sexy for VCs, and that's totally fine. Hardware is hard, but the way I look at it, if we're sitting here in 400 years time and it's a completely new era, whatever we do, we still need hardware. No matter if we all live in the matrix and have like AI powered lives, they still need physical things. You still need to walk on the floor and connect to things. It can't all just be done as an implant. So we believe that you need physical things, and more importantly than ever, we're seeing that screen ages and mobile devices aren't actually good for us, and that walking in cities and being healthy and fit and engaging with that city is actually something really, really important. It's been proven that actually people are less happy in cities and more happy in the countryside. So we've got to do something to make these cities better. So I'm not trying to be the most sexy thing for VCs. I'm trying to be something that can change the world with our technology, make impact across every single city and urban environment. And it's all about where can we find the most value from investor. If it's a PE fund that also do loads of real estate, great. If it's a digital signage company that digitalize cities and are looking for a more sustainable angle, that's great too. So there's lots of different avenues there. And if you're an industrial conglomerate making smart windows, you can probably sell loads of Pavegen because you're selling loads of windows and have those channels. So there's lots of different routes there for us, but probably not down the VC route.
In terms of, I'm gonna do a follow-up question on that in a moment. But in terms of IP, obviously you talk about international patents, and you're also dealing with some prosecutions. Have you found yourself, maybe from say China or the Far East, experienced people trying to copy your technology and deploy that as well? Are you having to, how is it something that you're regularly facing? Is people basically trying to steal your IP and deploy it as if it were their own?
So the first thing is, I believe imitation is the biggest form of flattery, right? So if people aren't copying you, you're not doing something right. The IP we've got coverage on is for a triangular tile, which we believe is the most efficient way of generating energy from people. Secondly, it's the way we broadcast data from our floor. And thirdly, it's the electromechanical design of our generator that really efficiently converts weight to electrical power. So we've tried to build the biggest defensive moat around us as possible, punching out as far as we can, so no one can build a triangular floor that looks like ours. And what that means is that if someone makes it in China and tries to import it to North America, Europe, or including UK, it will get seized by customs. We can actually stop that. But saying that, look, we don't have any massive competitors out there. I think one of the reasons is that if you were a Chinese engineer wanting to copy it and you tried to buy a Pavegen tile, we just wouldn't sell you one tile. We usually get heavily involved in a project, and we know that it's 100 square meters, it's a building project. We speak to the engineers, and when it's fishy, it's fishy. And we've had many of those conversations, so it's easy for us to tell if someone is trying to buy it to reverse engineer it. But saying that, look, generating energy from people is an old chestnut. It's been happening since the Viking raids rode across from the Nordics to England. It's been happening since the beginning of human civilization. And so we're just using a new approach to it. I think we've got the most novel way of doing it. I think it's the most scalable way of doing it. And we welcome other people to try it and grow the market with us.
In terms of your headquarters, your base, obviously we talked, you've got your head office here in central London, manufacturing in North London, and then you've got, I suppose, R&D centre in Cambridge. How do you find the UK as a base for this type of business? We've obviously talked about the VC space. My impression of, I suppose, even though London is the sort of VC capital of Europe, my impression of the VC space in the UK and Europe is we think a little bit small. In hindsight, would you, if you could kind of go again, would you think about trying to launch and grow the business in a different jurisdiction, maybe in the US, maybe in the Middle East? You know, would you approach it differently, and would you consider looking to grow the business in terms of the operations of the business outside the UK moving forwards?
Yeah, it's a great question. I guess I believe in brand Britain. I was really lucky. Just when I was in like my bedroom in Brixton, still messing around with Pavegen, I got a call from David Cameron's office, and he said, "Would you like to fly on Air Force One, the equivalent, to China and meet Prime Minister Xi of China and come on a trade mission?" So I go to Heathrow, it's like this VIP entrance I've never seen before. I get on a specially chartered Virgin 747, and we fly over with all these like crazy important people from, I think it's like the CEO of McLaren, the CEO of Caterpillar, the CEO of London Stock Exchange. The list went on and on and on of like insane people. And I just remember being like, having to pinch myself, am I here? And I think I got there, and they asked me to get on stage and speak before Prime Minister Xi of China and after David Cameron. I remember I hadn't slept all night, and I think I had a couple of G&Ts with some CEOs I met on the flight there. And I remember going, wow, this is an amazing opportunity. And I think from that, it's really taught me that brand Britain says a lot, right? Loads of these people's kids come to England for education. Our biggest export is arguably education. Everyone loves Oxford and Cambridge and all these academic institutions. So people are familiar with British culture. That's one thing. I guess people like the Queen and King, back in the day, and that really helps. And so one thing I always try and do is wherever I'm going to an area, I'll always work closely with the consulate, and the DIT or UKTI, the British Trade Group are excellent. They're there to help us. No one else I know around the world has this amount of support everywhere. I was out with the head of trade in Saudi last week, Kabir. He's amazing. He basically works for me, and our taxes, pay for it together. So the UK is incredible for this brand. And if I hold an event with Kabir in the Saudi embassy, everyone shows up. They get a letter from the king, not really from the king, but on the king's headed paper, and Paddington Bear might be there, or however you want to look at it. So that really helps me, having that element of people liking Britain, and think of those brands, iconic fashion brands that have come from the UK. That all helps on that side. I actually think the UK is like the best time zone, because we can sit and speak to San Francisco from like 4 or 5 p.m, but we can also speak to Australia and the Far East. So for me, it's a joy being in this market. I can be 6 hours to the Middle East, but I can also be 11 hours to parts of the States. So would I move? I wouldn't move, but I would definitely set up regional offices for like MENA and the USA. I think that every pound we bring into the UK will be so critical for going into the economy. Like, I believe whatever you say about the mess we're in right now and whatever the solution is in the future, you cannot argue with if there's 50 of me's all bringing in 100 million and having bums on seats and working, that's going to be so great for the economy. So I think I'm a big believer in Britain, and I think we can solve all our problems through export, and sell the brand UK as much as we can.
Well, I guess it's great to hear a positive, a positive experience, a positive message about, what is effectively a UK manufacturer that's doing well, and I think that's probably not spoken about enough. So it's great to have this sort of positive message to say about the country and about the UK. Obviously, we have listeners all over the world to the podcast, and viewers all over the world of the podcast. So it's great. It's actually really nice to say to have someone actually say that the UK is doing well. Because I think a lot of the time people wouldn't automatically have that assumption. Even I've learned something here actually, is that my automatic assumption and impression would be that the UK isn't a great place to be doing to having a business like yours. But actually, by the sounds of it, you're getting great support, particularly from the government. It's great to hear. Should we just talk about your current challenges? Like, what would you say are your biggest challenges you're experiencing right now? What are your biggest problems? What are the things that you're struggling most to solve at a business level?
Yeah, so I guess the first one is like we're scaling a lot. We've hired I guess probably like 10 people in the past few weeks. So maintaining culture as you scale is really important. Scaling individual teams is really important. I probably got like a 70% hit rate on employing good people. After the podcast, I'll probably tell you in confidence, it's actually more like 50%. Because hiring people is so hard, especially salespeople. But we've got a great sales team now, but definitely hiring the right people and scaling it in the right way is important. Second, there's no doubt about it that I'd be lying if I said the fundraising environment isn't challenging. Look, we're at 5% whatever interest. It's made it a lot harder for investors to be deploying cash into early stage businesses versus it's sitting in other places. And I'm sure I guess you're probably reaping the benefits of a high interest rate in your business.
No, I mean, ironically, I wouldn't say that's necessarily the case. We see it on both sides because obviously we get our funding from capital markets, and then we're lending that to developers. And I suppose if you're a developer, the environment right now is really challenging because high interest rates mean that the buyers of the properties that they're developing, they're finding it harder to afford the mortgages on it. So there's less buyer demand, which puts pressure on valuations of the land. So the land values go down. The landowners don't want to sell. So so it's harder to originate new loans. The existing loans, they're fine, but it's again, loans are staying on the book for longer. And then on the investor side, which I think is quite interesting, is because the cost of capital is high, and because I guess the opportunity cost right now isn't so great for an investor who a credit investor who would maybe hold or buy our loans. They don't look as attractive when the US government is paying someone the best part of 6%. The UK government is paying someone the best part of 5.25% to hold their debt. You're like, well, okay, well that's a difficult ask. And you say, well, you can have it risk free, or you can you have actual risk. So ironically, no, it's also equally difficult for us. I say equally difficult. I mean, obviously, I can't compare it exactly, but. I mean, from what I understand, the fundraising environment is difficult for a lot of VCs, for a lot of IPOs. Not IPOs, sorry. The IPO market is obviously feeding into that, but I'm conscious that the VC funding environment for startups and early stage companies is very, very difficult. Ironically, does that present opportunities for you we've kind of touched on the idea of you being acquired by a strategic partner. Are there technologies out there that, with companies struggling to be able to attract inward investment, does that then create opportunities for you to acquire bolt-on technologies to what you're doing?
I think it might even be the other way around. I think if you go to the States and you're a tech company, like valuations in the UK are so low compared to US valuations. And if you get the right side of a dollar conversion, you can get some amazing deals from a strategic investment or acquisition. I think that for us, we're probably, I'm a real stickler for like build it myself. Like I don't like hiring, no offense to my PR agency I hired last month, but I don't like hiring external agencies like PR. I don't like outsourcing my software development or my IT. So for me, I want to build it. I want to control it. I want to own it. So I don't think we've looked at like the idea of acquiring businesses. I think I'm really one for like build it myself, build the culture, get it right from the ground up. And I've heard too many stories about people being acquired and then just completely zoning out and all the value being lost overnight. And I'm really keen to build it from great people.
No, that's awesome. You were just saying when we were off camera, you've just been on a bit of a whirlwind trip. You've been in Riyadh. You've just about got all the sand out of your ears. You were in Qatar as well as that, and then you're about to head off to the States as well. And you've also got a 5-month-old baby. It sounds like you're living a pretty full-on lifestyle. How do you maintain a kind of an even keel? What do you do outside of work to maintain balance?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I could say to you, I meditate like a Buddhist for 10 hours a day, but I'd be lying. I guess the things I like to do is I always liken the entrepreneurial journey to climbing up a dark mountain with every step hurts. Death is at every single point, you could die at any moment. There's glass on the floor, everything hurts, and it's a challenge you can't do. And you can nearly see the top, you never get to it. And it honestly is like that being a startup. So I guess I've transferred that feeling to climbing mountains. And so I'm on a mission to climb the 80 highest 4,000 meter peaks in the Alps. And it's the same thing I'm used to, is you're up there at 2 a.m, there's a massive blizzard blowing, you've got 4,000 foot drop on your right, 3,000 foot drop on your left, you're on a tiny inch long ledge, there's no oxygen in the air, so you've got a massive headache, your lungs hurt, you can't stop breathing. But then when you get to the top, it's like the best feeling ever. And I like the humbling feeling of, no matter who you are, CEO, blah, 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 anyone, you're still just a dot on the mountain amongst the other dots. And it makes the kind of the scale of life really apparent. So I spend a lot of my time in the Alps, mountain climbing, and maybe once I sell Pavegen, you might see me in the Himalayas, but I don't have the time off to go that far yet.
Well, it sounds like a pretty good way of keeping your feet on the ground, albeit quite high up in the air, because these are not easy feats that you're looking to do.
The only downside of it is my key man insurance takes like 2 months to get, and they have to do like in-depth interviews about exactly what style of trad climbing I'm doing or what kind of rock and where to get the policy done. So that's the only downside.
Well, wow. Okay. Well, so fortunately, I'm going to just stick to tennis and road cycling, which even in its own right has its own inherent dangers, but it's not quite at the level of that level of mountaineering. You talk about your dad or your father as obviously quite a big part of your life. Are there any, would you say he's probably one of the most influential people in your lives, or has been? I suppose greatest source of inspiration, mentorship, or are there any other people as well as your father that you would highlight and acknowledge as being really important to the man you are today and where you've got to now?
I guess a couple of people. So I guess in the family, my granddad created one of the first bolt-on submarine U-2 boat detectors you could bolt onto a warship. So when they realised that all the British boats were getting destroyed by German subs, they would then quickly fashion this kind of like radar detector thing, bolt it onto the ship, and then they could spot the submarine. So he did that, and I was always like in his workshops messing around. So I guess he was an inspiration for me. And then I guess it might sound a bit contrived, but someone like Dyson, right? He was designing wheelbarrows that were not very impressive wheelbarrows. They had like a big round thing where the wheel is, and were all plastic, and it didn't work, right? And he was I think he was an architect, and he was really fascinated by it. And then the next idea is he came up with this idea for a vacuum cleaner, and everyone rejected him. And then, today he's probably one of the most celebrated industrialists in the world, who's also still leading his business, who's also got a massive engineering focus. Like the amount of engineers in Malmesford in Oxfordshire is insane. I know he's moved a lot of his operations to Singapore. So apart from his move to Singapore because he left the UK, I think it's amazing that he's took loads of rejections and he's still running the shop at kind of, I don't know how many years later, 30 years later, or how many years it's been.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, yeah, he got a lot of criticism, a lot of stick for moving a lot of his operations away from the UK, but you still have to doff your cap to him because he's obviously done some amazing things. And I suppose last question from me. If I was to ask your younger self, or if I was to ask your younger self, if you were to give your younger self a pep talk or some self-talk, some positive self-talk, what advice would you give to yourself and why?
Yeah, I think the first thing on that is like, I learned from every mistake. So yes, I could have done an MBA, but then I might have done something boring, like just done finance or something, because that's what I thought I was good in the MBA. I learned from being an engineer, getting my hands dirty, making mistakes. So I don't have any regrets per se, but I guess things that I found really important are the power of my tribe. So I try and put 10% of my time into my tribe, my community of entrepreneurs, other business leaders. And I think that's really amazing because it helps other people. But like 50% of my investment has come via introductions from other founders. And I think it always comes down to the fact that if I have a relationship with someone and they're like to their investor, you should meet Laurence, it's really interesting. That is going to be so much more impactful than an introduction from like my accountant or my lawyer, because they're really vouching for me. So I, invest, I mentor and support other companies, and I guess I'm supported by other companies too. I think, do you remember King of Shaves? That they,
of course, yeah.
So Will King founded King of Shaves over 20 years ago. He's been my mentor since he actually gave me my first prize from Shell. He was the judge. And I made friends with him there, and he's been a guide to me all this time. And so I think the power of a tribe is probably something I'd really look at. And then I think the power of, you're only going to be as good as your power to motivate people and tell stories. So even if you've got the best product in the world, let's say it's a magic energy capsule that will solve the world's energy problems, you've still got to sell it into corporates. You've still got to find your internal thought leader that is going to communicate and allow you to close that deal. So one thing that it took me a while, and I was so scared in the early days, I went to do a TED talk in Brazil, and I was shaking so much I could barely stand up because it was so new to me at the time. But I've really learned the power of telling a story and how impactful it can be to your business, and getting people hooked in from corporates, because you're only as good as how much they love your story. And sadly, that's kind of what it comes down to. So there's some of the things I wish I'd known a bit earlier in my career.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Laurence, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been fascinating. I love the product. I think it's an amazing product, and hopefully now our audience will know more about the product as well. If anyone wants to reach out to you, what's the best way of our audience getting in touch with you? You've got some social channels that people can connect with and follow, or any other particular preference for someone to be able to reach out?
Yeah, we're pretty active on Instagram, Facebook as Pavegen, Pavegen, and then also I talk about Pavegen on Laurence Kemball-Cook on Instagram. That's like my corporate account that I love chatting to people on. So always up for answering questions and getting stuck into things on there.
All right, awesome. Well, as I said at the beginning, I'm Michael Dean. You can find me online at property_funder. You can also block me and mute me there if that's also your preference. But for now, thank you very much for watching and listening. Laurence, thank you very much for coming on the show, and we'll catch you again on the next one.